guys, my name is Kat and this is Vegan Diver Kat. So today I wanted to do a bit of a different video and I wanted to give you an insight into the Ocean Pancake Podcast. So for those of you guys who do not know, about 3 to 6 months ago, I started a podcast all focused on marine conservation and sustainability. There I talk to experts in the field of marine conservation, and yeah, we just have a great time chatting about whatever it is they're experts in. So I've interviewed people about the plastic pollution crisis, about Sharknets, about the shark culling, about veganism, about climate change, just so many things. You can check out the website oceanpancake.com or join the Facebook group Ocean Pancake to join the community and be part of this movement to create education and science more accessible to the general public, because I think it's up to all of us to kind of work together to help protect our oceans. So yeah, today I wanted to share one of these videos that I actually recorded a long time ago, but this was one of my favorite podcasts I have ever did. It's with my friend Scott Wallace, who is an ocean advocate. He is a vegan advocate. He has been on the Sea Shepherd boat. He has been doing educational talks at schools and at events. He's an inspirational person, and genuinely, he has taught me so much over the years. But yeah, so I wanted to share this video with you, and I know it's a little bit different from my usual stuff, and it's a little bit longer, but I was figuring if you wanted to just put it on and listen to it while you walk around your house or do something, or you rather listen to the full podcast, then you can check it out on any podcast playing app. But otherwise, yeah, feel free to enjoy Scott and I chatting. I hope the quality is okay. But yeah.
Every day there's a new news story about the crisis facing our ocean, whether it's the plastic issue, overfishing, pollution. If the oceans die, we die. Fortunately, we have plenty of environmental activists, marine conservationists, and eco-warriors who are out there every day fighting to protect our oceans and our Earth. On the Ocean Pancake Podcast, we're going to be hearing from some of them about how to decrease our environmental footprint, go plastic-free, participate in ocean conservation, cleanups, and even maybe some marine science. So, welcome to the Ocean Pancake Podcast, where the goal is sustainability and living a turquoise life. My name is Kat Andriskova, and I'm your host today. Let's get into this week's episode. All right, so welcome to the Ocean Pancake Podcast. Today I'm here with Scott Wallace, which is one of my oldest friends in Australia, and he has recently, the past 3 years, become an epic ocean vegan activist and has been sharing his love of, nature and the environment and animals with people. So thank you so much for being here, Scott.
Hello. Thanks, Kat.
No worries. So let's just kind of get started with a little bit of your background. So you studied marine biology. Why did you choose that?
Yeah, so I studied a Bachelor of Science at Griffith University on the Gold Coast and majored in marine biology and ecotourism. The lead up to that, I spent a lot of time in and around the ocean as I was growing up. So my family always lived on the coast. And so a lot of time swimming and snorkeling, and at the time, plenty of fishing. And as I got older, a bit more hunting and gathering and, collecting from the ocean treats and shells and wildlife as well. So I've had a deep connection, a deep affinity to the ocean. It's a life force for this planet. And so there's just a natural awe and wonder about it. And that curiosity meant that I spent a lot of time exploring as much as I can with it. As I got older, coming through high school, I went to a high school which had one of the only marine studies subjects in the whole city, which was quite good. And so I spent a few years doing marine studies at high school, and then I eventually enrolled into a science degree with a bit of guidance from my de facto grandfather at the time, who said, "Hey, science, I reckon you really enjoy this. It's your vibe." So I followed his advice, and it was an excellent choice. And yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful, so far, and been a great journey going down this path of conservation and environmental science.
Yeah, so we actually met about 4 or 5 years ago. I had already become an instructor, and Scott was doing his rescue course, about to be a dive master. You were kind of in
I believe so. Yeah.
that zone of time.
Yeah.
So we really got together because of our love of the ocean, and we did some diving together. Unfortunately, not as much as I would have liked.
Never enough.
Yeah, never enough. But mostly on the Gold Coast. I do remember both of us at that time were talking about spearfishing, which is quite funny to think about. Did you spearfish a lot, or did you fish
A
mostly?
lot of fishing. At times I'd have a gidgee, like a little hand spear, and whether it was octopus or trying to catch fish underwater like that when I was younger. But a shit ton of fishing. The communities where I grew up with and the people I was surrounded with, revolved around fishing, and that form of exploiting the oceans. But yeah, I had a lot of wonderful experiences as doing that in the past. But reflecting upon this stuff, there's a lot of insight that I'm looking forward to sharing later on.
Oh, definitely. So after doing your undergraduate in the marine science, you kind of became more involved in various conservation things. So could you tell us a little bit more about what conservation projects you took part in and how you found them?
Definitely. So I think what I found is, especially within the environmental science field, biology, ecology, there's an imperative that we seek out opportunities to develop ourselves professionally, personally. Within this space, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. And so networking and volunteering was an absolutely crucial aspect to developing myself. And so throughout my undergrad, there was lots of hours spent volunteering, but some of the most notable projects that I've been involved with, there was a group called Wild Mob, and they're a conservation group based on the east coast of Australia. And they do a variety of terrestrial, marine conservation projects where they get volunteers on board from all around the country. They do, 2, 3, 4, 5-day trips to the reef, to do, marine debris, to do birding, to what else? Do wallaby tagging, weed gathering. So I did a few trips with Wild Mob a few years ago, and following my honors, I took a year off and did a bit of traveling and went to South Africa because I wanted to play with some sharkies over there. And so there's a wonderful, there's a wonderful group called South African Shark Conservancy, SASC, and they're based in a town called Hermanus, which is about an hour or so from Cape Town. And I spent 2 months over in South Africa, and I did a advanced elasmobranch field ecology course. So what that means in basic terms is elasmobranchs are like all your stingrays, all your sharks and skates. They're all these cousins. But essentially it focused around hanging out with sharks. And we did underwater diving and snorkeling to grab sharks to then tag them underwater, which is really, really cool.
Wow.
Lots of fishing to catch sharks, to tag them, brav work, genetics, like a really solid, comprehensive program that was very well priced. South African Shark Conservancy was an absolutely wonderful experience. Plenty of times with the great white sharks, cage diving at the time. And then upon returning from South Africa, the Brisbane chapter for Sea Shepherd that I was involved with, I got in touch because they were doing a big cull of volunteers, because a lot of people just jump on and then don't do much. But fortunately, they got in touch and saw that I'd spent some time in South Africa with the sharks, and they said, there's a couple of opportunities upcoming. Would I like to be involved? And so leading from that, I got pretty involved with Sea Shepherd upon my return from South Africa. I volunteered with Sea Shepherd for years before that, but I wasn't very active. I just did a few market stalls, a couple of fundraisers. But upon my return, we had a shark spotters trial, which was down in Byron Bay on the east coast. We do have this massive destructive shark nets and drum lines throughout the waters of Australia, which kill marine life indiscriminately. And so the idea was to look at non-lethal alternatives for addressing shark interactions with humans. And so we did a trial down at Watergoes Beach, and it's called a Shark Spotters Program, which was actually developed back in South Africa, where we have a lookout on a high ridge or mountain looking down into the water, and you can see a 3, 4, 5 meter fish cruising through. Yeah. And so the idea with this program was to show that we can see sharks. We can then notify people, the person down on the beach, to put up a flag or some form of alarm system and get the shark nets out. So yeah, that was an interesting time to get involved with Sea Shepherd a few years ago, and a lot's kicked off with Sea Shepherd since then.
Yeah, because South Africa has been using this system for many years now quite successfully with the flags. The big benefit that South Africa has in comparison to the coast in Australia, where we lived, is they have the big cliffs and the really high points, as opposed to some of the arguments on the Gold Coast have been, we don't have these points to look out for the sharks, therefore we need the shark nets, we need the culling, we need the baited hooks. For those of you guys who don't know, in Australia there was this big hysteria, especially after the whole Jaws movie was released, where thousands and thousands of sharks were culled and killed by spearfishermen, by just divers, because they would go in and see these gray nurse sharks particularly, which are completely harmless, but because they look kind of scary, I'll insert a photo, and they cruise really slowly, they became a very easy target. So the population decreased down to something like 3,000 individuals from a very healthy population before. So ever since then, they've become protected, and now, they're trying their best to bring the population back up. But still, to this day, I think much better in terms of the numbers of the shark nets and the shark culling. Western Australia, the East Coast, it's still happening right now, and it's not helpful. Could you just describe what a shark net is for those people who don't know? No.
It's unstable.
Okay, I'll
get
you
there.
Back. Yeah.
Awesome. So in the 60s, they put the shark nets in because the Queen was coming to Queensland. And since the 60s, they've caught over like 55,000 sharks.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them endangered and threatened. Obviously, all their lives are important, but if you want to go down that path, endangered and threatened sharks. Yeah. And like over 30,000 other marine life. So what? Dolphins, whales, turtles, rays. It's all, killing indiscriminately so much wildlife for very little efficiency.
But basically no gain as well. I'll insert a photo of what a shark net is as well, but it's not what many people imagine, which is a whole barrier going across a beach or something. It's actually just a sort of little flag thing, which just hangs a couple meters below the surface, a couple meters above the bottom of the ocean, and it's 12 meters long or something. So it's literally this just net in the middle of the ocean where any animal can get stuck in, and then Sea Shepherd is not actually allowed to intervene and get them out, even if they're rays, even if they're turtles, and they just have to watch these animals die. So there's quite a few photos, and again, all the links to this stuff will be down below, or if you're watching the video, hey guys, here are the photos of kind of some of the atrocities that Sea Shepherd see when they go check out.
So just in terms of those nets in Queensland, they're 183 meters long, and between 4, 6, 8 meters deep, of depth, but they sit in a dozen meters of water. So they're just like a little tennis court. They really don't work too well. And the campaign that I've been involved with is Operation Apex Harmony. So the monitoring of these drum lines, we're out there to document and bear witness to what's actually being caught on the drum lines. And so it's a very political campaign because we're trying to get governments and councils to remove these these destructive nets. But, globally, there's so many threats to sharks, largely through finning, direct target fishing, overfishing, bycatch, so many threats to our oceans in general. So got to cut this shit out.
Yeah, we don't need more of this stuff. And I
No,
think yearly
no.
there's six fatal shark attacks on humans, while what is the number? 150,000 an hour? I'm not quite sure.
So I think the last few years it's been less than a dozen shark attacks globally per year, roughly. And we kill 11,000 sharks an hour.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's insane. And
just for reference, coconuts kill more people than shark attacks do. Just saying. And
hippopotamuses and horses and cows, vending machines, everything.
Everything. Yeah. And since we're both divers, we both dived with sharks quite a few times. Oh, actually, before we completely go to the next topic, what you were describing that you were doing in South Africa, which is actually diving down and tagging the sharks. Which species of sharks were you doing? Do you have some footage of this? This is so exciting. I haven't even heard about this, guys.
I think I do. I think I do have some footage somewhere. So what we were working with were mainly endemic small sharks. So shy sharks, cat sharks, or I think it's called a leopard.
The zebra leopard.
Zebra leopard, I believe.
Different countries call them different things. So
so it's a leopard shark in South Africa. It's small, and so they're easy to grab somewhat. There was a couple of dives where just hanging out on the water in the kelp in the cold as water and trying to find sharks. So very cool experience. Very interesting.
You guys don't try this at home. Please don't grab sharks if you're out there diving. In general, don't go touching any sea life unless...
Wear gloves.
Wear gloves for sure, but unless you get onto some of these conservation kind of projects and stuff. And I would love to go to South Africa and check it out. Well, I'm going to be nearby now, so maybe I'll have the opportunity to.
Cat's going to Africa.
Yeah, literally in what? In 12 hours, my flight leaves in 12 hours, so it's
cracker.
Going to be exciting. All right. So you already touched upon a little bit about Sea Shepherd, but I think most people know Sea Shepherd as one of the biggest kind of hardcore conservation groups out there in the world. How can people get involved if they want to? Because of course everyone wants to get on that boat, but it is a very long process before you actually get invited on to the hardcore stuff, really. Yeah,
well, I really like Sea Shepherd are considered extreme in some senses because we do things. Like we live in a world where there's a lot of banner holding and like just get in there and get shit done. So Sea Shepherd's ethos is, So it's just about Sea Shepherd focus on direct action marine conservation, where they pool resources and volunteers and ships and finances into campaigns where they know there's going to be a profound effect. They're going to be able to tackle illegal, unregulated fishing, or, they're currently working on illegal fishing and human rights issues in Africa, in Tanzania. So their mission statement is to look after all marine life and ecosystems, big and small. And so their approach is built upon volunteers. It's built upon the passion and effort and time and energy and skills of people. Sea Shepherd is made up of passionate people. And so there are chapters all across the world. And I'd say for people that are interested in jumping on board with Sea Shepherd, one, depending on the level of involvement you want to jump on at, it could be donations, monthly donations, buying some merch. So much of Sea Shepherd's campaigns is able to occur through merchandise. Get a sticker, get a hoodie. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. They need support from everywhere. So join a chapter, start your own chapter. How else? Yeah, just share the work that Sea Shepherd are doing and promote what's going on. Sea Shepherd are in the business of going out of business. Sea Shepherd don't want to be around, forever. We want to create a culture and a planet where we don't need to be out there enforcing laws where countries aren't enforcing them. They lack resources or whatever it is. One of my big drivers to explore more with Sea Shepherd and be on board with them is their integrity in terms of their actions and their beliefs and their values. Sea Shepherd's campaigns are all vegan. And so their approach is, we want to protect the oceans, yes, but if we're aware that I've seen estimates between 1/3 to like 40% of all the fish caught in the ocean is actually ground up and then turned into livestock feed. So if we're wanting to protect the oceans, even eating land-based animal flesh is going to be eating the oceans as well.
In some way.
So
it's all connected.
Yeah. And I think, I'm sure we'll chat about it shortly, but that alignment with doing as much as we can. And that's one of the standout features I feel Sea Shepherd has, is not being out on the oceans eating marine life when you're trying to protect marine life. It seems simple, but these are thoughts I haven't had, for many, many years until recently.
Yeah, no, especially coming as divers, as people growing up around the ocean. Well, for me, it was, I always loved meat and I loved seafood. I remember the first time I read that Sea Shepherd was vegan, or like all the campaigns on their boats and everything, they only cooked vegan food. I remember just being almost shocked and taken aback. Like, why? Like, veganism is so extreme. It's so bizarre. Like, why is this a thing? And it really took me several years to like make the connection, because I came to Australia in 2012, started to kind of get involved with Sea Shepherd a little bit back then. And not until 2 years ago did it make sense. Like, well, obviously, if you're going to be on the ocean trying to protect marine life, how can you eat it? But yes, so how did you first actually come across veganism? Because as both of us are here prime examples, we grew up eating meat, we grew up fishing, we grew up the very typical Western,
omnivorous diet, meat, eggs,
relationship
dairy,
with everything. So how did you kind of make that switch or make that connection finally?
Yeah, sure. As Kat was saying, like, my background was very similar. I lived in a society where standard omnivorous diet, the standard and typical interactions with animals was either through watching documentaries or watching them on my plate being cooked up, or watching them in my fish tank, or, on the end of my fishing line.
And occasionally a nice fish swimming by while you're diving.
Oh yeah, diving. Yeah, of course.
You know what? I'm hungry for fish. I'm like, what?
I had a few people throughout my life, when I wasn't vegan, they were vegan. And so there was always this thing at the back of my mind, like, veganism, it's not for me. Studying environmental science, I started to really explore conservation and sustainability, and thought that I was very well equipped with the information and knowledge in terms of what are the most pressing ecological issues that our planet faces. And towards the end of my degree, I started doing some more research into the animal farming sector. And maybe a few months before that, or I can't remember, it's so hazy now. It seems like literally a different world for me. But I went vegetarian maybe half a year. With the last meat I was eating, like fish that I was catching myself, or like wild kangaroo. And a very important catalyst for me was the documentary Cowspiracy, which was a very powerful documentary which really highlighted the magnitude and the scale of the effects of the animal agriculture industry across the world.
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware of any of this information.
None.
Now, I studied, conservation and sustainability for 3-4 years as an environmental scientist. Why the hell wasn't I told this information? And so it was very frustrating to realize, and I was very let down in my institution at the time, because they didn't tell me that, potentially up to 51% of global greenhouse gas emissions is coming from the animal ag sector. I've read some, data which supersedes that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty full on. And so coming to the understanding that the animal ag sector is the single most destructive industry on our planet was concerning. I was contributing to this industry when I'm trying my best to protect the planet. I didn't understand the effects that my choices had. The impacts of our consumption is so far removed from what we see on our plate. And so my main driver to go vegan was to minimize my environmental footprint at the time. Obviously, a whole bunch of other benefits from veganism pop up as you start to realize this. But the challenging thing is that we live in a society where, as you mentioned before, veganism is considered extreme.
Yeah.
It's literally the least extreme thing I could possibly think of. Wanting to, the basic tenet is that if you believe it's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering to animals
or to anything,
of course,
animals are a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Cowspiracy for me was also that catalyst I needed, because just like Scott, I considered myself an environmentalist, and from what I was told, it was take shorter showers, consider how much ride your bike, consider how many times you do your washing, try and drive less, maybe don't fly back and forth from Australia times. Like, that was my big problem.
Meat-free Monday.
Yeah,
I did meat-free Monday.
I didn't even know meat-free Monday was a thing. It just never came up. And until I watched Cowspiracy, I remember just watching it with my boyfriend at the time, and at the end of it, when it ended, there was just silence in the room, and then we just looked at each other and we're like, guess we're vegan now. And it was very much that immediate
overnight
clicking. Very much so, because you try your best your whole life, and I'm an animal lover, I love nature, like let's try to conserve this beautiful planet. You go on hikes and camping and spend so much time in nature, and you pat your dog and you pat your cat and you see a cute cow and you're like, oh, that's adorable, and then you buy a steak. So
that's the disconnection that it's that disconnection that has been the basis for our ecological destruction and our very violent relationship with a lot of animals throughout our lives. But the way our culture is set up and the way the world is operating, the majority of it at the moment is very anthropocentric. It's very human-centered. So the way things are going is because it's humans' interest over everything else. And it's no surprise that we've been exposed to so much conditioning, so much indoctrination. For example, with carnism, which is this dominant, violent ideology that is all around us, which is actually the thing that's conditioned us to eat certain animals. So we have this arbitrary distinction between these animals are edible, these are inedible, these are to be conserved, these are to be killed, where, of all the millions and millions of species, there's a few that we consume and the rest are wild, or they shouldn't be.
Or some are pets.
Or some are pets. Yeah, exactly.
What I found most interesting about this idea is that it's very cultural, as you said, since every single country has a different acceptance belief. Like, for example, in India, they won't eat cows, right?
Crazy.
Yeah, so for the
It's
Hindus,
cows.
the cows are considered a sacred animal.
Yeah, well, in
Um,
Europe, cows are fair game, but
yeah.
in France, they eat horses, which to some of us seems insane. You know,
Yeah.
I was just in Cambodia last year, and they ate my dog. You know, which was terribly confronting. But you know, for
Yeah.
them, dogs are just like for Europeans, pigs
Pigs.
or cows are.
Yeah, of course.
And it's just this, every culture has kind of created this set of rules about what they can eat or can't eat. You know, some people are like, oh, it's fine to eat you know, dogs or cats even. And
That's right.
if you would say that to someone in Australia, they would call, you know, PETA and get the whole get the whole
Of course.
Brisbane to sign a petition. So
Yeah. It's the cognitive dissonance that when we have these two conflicting beliefs within our minds, for example, for me, it was, I'm a marine conservationist. I'm here to protect the planet. I love the ocean, but then I'm either killing fish myself and consuming their flesh, or I'm paying someone to slaughter fish for me. Those two beliefs cannot exist at the same time. One's got to give. And so the thought that I'm an animal lover while consuming and exploiting animals is bullshit.
mm-hmm.
There's no way we can be like that. It's inconsistent. There's no alignment with that. And for me, I lost so much sleep starting to question myself over this. Why is it that I'm so against the Japanese whaling, but then I'm killing all these bream and trevally and this and octopus? And why is that morally acceptable? Why is it morally unacceptable to kill whales or dolphins? Well, geez, all of these creatures we need to acknowledge their right to life and flourish and exist separate to our interference. And the oceans, you know, a fish gets so neglected. Fish feel pain. Fish have complex behaviors and communities and social interactions, and they just get pushed to the side because I justified it for years. Who cares about fish, you know? But there's the little thought in the back of my mind, imagine getting hooked like this through your mouth and brought up to the surface to suffocate.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
And it's the whole other thing of the sports fishing for sharks, where it's justified. Oh, hey, we catch them, but it's catch and release. So, you know, don't worry, they're just hooked, you know, for 20 minutes and they flash around fearful for their life.
Yeah.
Okay, we let them back into the water, which is a whole separate, you know, hunting. Because we still have to, you know, acknowledge there are places in the world where people do have to hunt for animals to sustain themselves. And, but those places have a very different relationship with their food than us in the Western world, where, as you said, you know, we go to a shop and we buy something prepackaged. We've never seen the animal. For us, it's meat, you know, ready. Well, you know, in a lot of cultures like Native American cultures and even Hinduism and a lot of places, they very much like thank their food, and they, you know, they acknowledge it comes from energy and stuff. And places like the Inuits, you know, they don't have any
can't grow
plants.
crops.
Yeah, they don't have any plants to live there. So
no,
like 90% of their you know, calorie intake has to come from meat. So it's just that very much.
You've touched upon it there. It's the doctrine of necessity.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to apply to these decisions when it comes to, you know, our choices in how we interact, what we consume, what we purchase. We don't need to eat any animal products to thrive and survive at all. I believe that one stage we needed to because of the education and the conditioning and the rubbish that was filled into our minds, which keeps us as a consumer in this very destructive system. Do we need to be doing this? Do we need to be exploiting and using animals? Well, some people, as Kat said, yes. And there's no discussion or debate there as to whether that's morally acceptable. It is. Look, it sucks that there's suffering, but there's a difference between having to hunt and live off the land out of necessity And the majority of our exploitation, which is not for necessity. We have supermarkets, we have options, we have everything that I used to eat as an omnivore. I consider myself an omnivore, but biologically speaking and physiologically, doesn't stack up anymore.
No.
Plants. What was I saying?
The necessity thing.
Necessity thing, yeah. The best reasons that we have for eating and exploiting animals is our culture, is for taste, convenience, and pleasure.
Yeah.
That's the best reasons we have. And so if we're against unnecessary suffering, then any of those reasons are unnecessary. And so you just follow these things to their logical conclusion. And, you know, if we need to hunt, if we need to survive, if I actually end up on a deserted island, like, and I have to survive, then fuck, I'll probably need to survive and kill things. But we have the liberty, especially in developed societies and the Western world. That dichotomy frustrates me. But yeah, in this space, where we have choice, not everyone has the choice. And so we have an obligation to exercise that choice, to live in alignment, to protect this planet, to reduce the suffering and increase the peace on this planet. It's not up to governments. It's not up to corporations. It's up to us. We drive these systems. Whatever we contribute towards, whatever we pay for, is going to keep it going.
Yeah, the supply and demand thing.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who, so we've argued about the necessity aspect, but what about people who say we have evolved to eat meat, or it's part of our evolution, it's part of our societal growth? Because there are studies out there which show that the moment of the greatest development of our brain was when we started consuming meat. Well, there are other studies which say it was actually when we started cooking, therefore being able to extract more nutrients from food. But in general, we have been eating meat for thousands of years.
Very long time. Yeah.
So what do you say to those people about?
Yeah, and that's a valid question, because I pose that to myself and vegans, many times over the years. And I think it's hard to dispute that the consumption of animal flesh was an important part of our development. That's the evidence that I've seen. And that was then. We now know we don't need to consume these products to survive. Just because we did it before doesn't mean, and just because we've done it like that doesn't mean it needs to continue. We need to focus on these issues and really analyze it, apply a bit of logic and a bit of reason to this. And so, I used to say, but the things like, oh, but lions eat gazelle, therefore, I'm entitled to eat my animals. But that's like a appeal to nature fallacy. We're not lions. We have completely different physiology. We don't go sniffing each other's asses when we meet each other. We don't kill our babies. So, there's so many of these issues can be drawn to their logical conclusion. And we look at the health effects of consuming animal products, which this stuff blew my mind. This was so concerning to find out that what recently the World Health Organization have listed processed meats and bacon as a class 1 carcinogenic compound. Yeah. Just like smoking causes lung cancer, these products cause bowel cancer.
Yeah, indisputably.
Indisputably. And then red meat being a class 2A carcinogen, likely to be cancer causing to humans. So like a plant-based diet is a whole foods plant-based vegan diet is the only diet which actually reverses heart disease. And this is the biggest killer of people throughout the world.
Yeah.
Heart disease, atherosclerosis is the number 1 killer. And so if we can reverse the biggest killer and in a lot of instances prevent that, wow, we really need to be advocating for this. But, we come across resistance. We come across resistance from industry, from governments, from the nutritional information saying we need to eat these products. But plant-based diets is where we need to be focusing our efforts. United Nations, the UNEP, 8 years ago now, said that we need a global urgent shift to a plant-based diet to address the worst effects of climate change.
Yeah, yeah.
It's imperative.
So it's the climate change, it's our health, and of course it's the compassion for the animals. There's so many wonderful, for those of you guys listening, there's so many wonderful resources out there that you can check out. Just like Scott and I kind of got that shift to the understanding of the environment through Cowspiracy. There's other documentaries you can watch. Some of my favorites are Forks Over Knives. Have you seen that one? That one.
Forks Over Knives. What the Health?
One. Yeah. What the Health.
So many.
So tons of those. All the resources will be down below, so you can check those out, because really, if the environment isn't your driving force, and that's okay, we all have different priorities, but at the very least, our bodies is the one vessel we have in life, so if you want to take care of it, eating plants is really the way to go, and there's so many other benefits as well.
Yeah, and I don't know how you feel, Kat, but for me, veganism hasn't been a sacrifice in any way. It's been an absolute joy. And I never thought I would have said that a few years ago. I was arguing with all the vegans and, that was my indoctrination. But all the foods that we used to eat, we've got them as vegan versions. And there's, such an abundance of delicious, healthy foods out there. And it's a matter of, if we go to the supermarket, instead of grabbing the dairy milk, we just go, almond, and then, soy, rice,
have a choice of 15 milks, now. For me, it wasn't so much a sacrifice, but coming from France, especially, cheese is so deeply ingrained into our society. It took me a good 8 months to quit cheese. Like, for me, the meat was easy, but the cheese was insanely difficult. And I've actually read studies, and cheese is as addictive as heroin, apparently. They have opiates in it, which actually makes the baby latch on to the mother and keep drinking, so it stays healthy and strong. So as adults, as human people, we still get addicted.
Not baby calves. Not baby calves.
But we still have that addiction. So that was really hard for me to quit. And still going back to France, they just don't have many vegan options available in restaurants and things like that. So it's not like it was, a sacrifice, but the convenience thing for me, the number one kind of issue I've faced with is the convenience. And that's the truth. In places like Australia, being vegan is very easy now. It's basically accepted as the norm almost. Like, in many places you can get a vegan option. They have vegan options on menus in the shops. Every supermarket will have soy milk. But when you're traveling, when you're in tiny little towns all over the world, there is definitely that aspect of having to plan ahead and having to, be mindful, and worst case scenario, just buying kilos and kilos of fruit and just living off that for a while.
Yum.
So I think the biggest issue most people face, and I face definitely, was the convenience aspect. But how can you argue convenience versus your heart health, or convenience versus animals,
the life of an animal,
or the environmental footprint? So it's really just that. But
the plant thing, one thing I came across a lot, and that I asked, was like, the plants have feelings, and you can't be killing plants because that's hypocritical. And plants do have a form of intelligence. They're able to respond to the sunlight and, respond to stimuli. Yeah. That doesn't mean plants are sentient. Doesn't mean that it's, that plants suffer. They don't have a brain. They don't have a central nervous system. And it's not about having a zero footprint. And I think a lot of people, and I did as well, I had this feeling that these vegans are just they think they're so superior and so morally better than everyone. But they're not zero footprint. No one's going to have a zero footprint. And all we need to do is acknowledge that and go, okay, we just need to work on minimizing our footprint as much as possible. And so the adoption of a plant-based diet is the quickest, cheapest, most effective way to minimize your ecological footprint. We're talking about 1/18 of the land needed to feed someone a vegan diet compared to a heavy omnivorous diet, 1/13 of the water, half of the greenhouse gas emissions. It's very simple in theory, but when it comes to putting this into practice, there are a whole bunch of barriers that we face: convenience, our culture, the system, the way that it's set up. Because there's a reason why we continue to support violent industries, is because we're disconnected from it. It keeps the economies going, and that's the space we're in at the moment. And so we do need a very big transformation of culture in order to live in an ecologically sustainable way, live in alignment, and to look after this planet. It's imperative. And 60 odd billion land animals killed a year?
Mm-hmm.
That's excluding the oceans.
Yeah.
They measure the ocean stuff in tons, in like millions of tons.
No, that's crazy. Did you also hear this one, that vegans are the reason for the like enormous deforestation because of the soy? Because soy milk and soy products have become so popular. So I was curious. So I was like, oh, I'll do some research, I'll look into this. And I found that from the the Amazon, from Brazil, 39 million tons of soy are taken to Europe every single year. And you're like, wow, that's a lot of soy milk. And then there's this little footnote caveat, like 90% of that goes into animal feed.
Yep, livestock. And so that's a very important point. Like, some of these monocultures can be so destructive, whether it's feeding plant-based diets for people or, mainly grains and soy for livestock. Yeah. In the US, over 80% of the soy that's grown is for livestock. And so like, that's clear what's happening there.
Yeah, just the inconsistencies there.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so there's so much more we could talk about in terms of the actual, environmental aspect of it, but highly recommend you guys check out Cowspiracy for that. We're going to be wrapping up shortly, so just wanted to kind of do a bit of a concluding thing. Scott not only, has a great Instagram where he shares a lot of, info and about all these things, veganism and the ocean. He works with Sea Shepherd and, participates in those fundraisers, campaigns, that's the word. And then one of the last things he does, and I haven't heard much about this, but I constantly keep seeing photos of him going to schools, and so talking to the schools. So can you just tell us a little bit about that aspect, the education?
For sure.
That's the best hope we have, educating.
I agree. And so I think it's all about planting seeds, right? And it's all about informing people, educating people, and not shaming and blaming people into feeling guilty or off guard because they weren't aware of the facts or the way things are going. And so a few years ago, I started putting myself out there to do presentations and speeches at events on veganism, on the animal ag sector and environmentalism. And eventually, through one of my university subjects, there was a law elective called Environmental Advocacy Clinic. And we had to pick a topic and go and deliver this to the community and, do a speech or do presentations or do a write-up. And so I used that as a starting point to actually contact schools and start getting into the education sphere through that way. And the schools have been quite receptive, at least the ones that I've presented to. And so it's great to know that there's an opportunity to go and hopefully inspire, educate, and inform kids as to what's happening with these very important issues, to get them questioning, what is my relationship with nature? Do I love animals? Do I not? What about this? What about my diet? And I feel like it's very, very important to keep educating, to keep persisting with these issues that are so passionate, that are going to change the world. And I'm actually off to Canberra this weekend, which is very exciting, to present at the Earth Festival. It's a 2-day festival down in Canberra, and I'll be talking about reevaluating our relationship with nature and how important it is to question that. Education for me is one of the most important things, and I find it so rewarding and so valuable. And it's educating everyone, not just younger people. Yeah. We're always learning, we're always growing, and yeah, that's really what I want to concentrate my efforts and time and energy into, is speeches, lectures, and keeping this stuff going. I was quite lucky to have been invited to do my first guest lecture at university.
That's amazing.
End of last year, yeah. And I sat the course the year before.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's been a really exciting journey, and I'm looking forward to seizing more opportunities and creating them.
Definitely.
To better this planet.
And what can individual people do? So what's the biggest kind of tip you can give people? You've been on this incredible journey, and you've had these wonderful opportunities, but you found them yourself. How can you tell other people where should they look if they want to get into any campaigns or all those words, involved and active?
Yeah, for sure. It depends where people are at. Like, everyone's going to be on a spectrum between just wanting to learn more information and finding out more, to then, getting involved with volunteering with organizations that may resonate with people that are tackling issues that they're concerned about. It's important to realize to not get overwhelmed. There's so much injustice in this planet. Yeah. There's so much unnecessary suffering. There's so much exploitation. We can't tackle it all. So we choose issues that are the most important to us. Yeah. And it's just about refining where our time and energy goes into. And we're going to find people and there's going to be intersections between all these issues and people and campaigns where we share what's important, we get involved, we volunteer. And in terms of the activist space for environmental issues and veganism, animal rights side of things, there's so many groups popping up at the moment. Get involved with protests or marches, and Anonymous for the Voiceless, they do Cube of Truths, public outreach and education. So follow what feels right and put yourself out there. For any vegans that are listening, that aren't yet active, it's the first step is to stop contributing to these issues. And that's wonderful, and that's going to change the world. But there's still other people that are unwillingly contributing to things that they wouldn't want to wish upon their worst enemies. And so get active, get out there, get this information out there. It's imperative. And only vegans are going to be advocating for veganism. Yep. Even environmentalists, so many of my friends, environmentalists, aren't vegan. They haven't made the connection yet. And that's okay. That's okay. It's about this journey of endless understanding and awareness. And get out there, get active. We're going to continue changing the world with what we do, and the collective effect of individual actions is what's going to change the world, either for the worse or for the better. So
we have to hope that it's for the better, huh?
Of course, like here in Queensland, there's like 700,000 fishermen. And so, yeah, it's just one person, like it was me with my dad on the weekend fishing, but there's 700,000 other people doing the same thing. Yeah. And so recreational fishermen catch more than the commercial fishermen in this state.
Really?
And so, yes, hectic. And so it comes down to taking responsibility for our actions and realizing that everything totals up. Mm. And that's why it's individuals' responsibility to be influencers, to be change agents, to have the conversations, to purchase the products that align with who they are. I lived out of alignment for a long time, Kat, and it seemed like you did as well.
Yeah.
So
And I think
We
the
can
best
match
thing
our
is,
actions
yeah,
with our beliefs. That's all it comes down to.
yeah,
Consistency, integrity, and feeling that we're living in alignment to protect this planet and our beliefs as an individual.
yeah. And the best
Which
thing is, if you live that truth, or if you make those choices and you eat the plants rather than the animals, and you talk about it, people around you will, listen. And this is, for a lot of people in my life, I came someone who loved steak all the time. All I would talk about was steak. And now they see the enormous changes I've made, and they take a step back and they're like, oh, who is this person? How come all of a sudden it's different? So they kind of, listen, they open their mind a little bit. And so many people in my life have gone vegan, and so many people in my life have, just decreased the amount of meat they consume, and they've started to look more into where they get their meat and things like that. So at least, everyone's doing their part. But I think, just by leading by example, you can already make a huge difference. If you're not ready to kind of get out there and be an activist, just by making those choices for yourself, your friends will
being
notice.
an activist, is an influencer.
Yeah.
That's right. I just want to comment on one thing there, that I started questioning, where was I getting my meat from? It's more sustainably sourced. And then I cut down to have a meat-free Monday. But what I realized was that I did meat-free Monday because I wanted to feel good about my exploitation of animals every other day of the week. I wanted to know that I'm being good and I'm having meat-free, but don't worry about the rest. And so for a lot of people, when it came to having human slaves, which is still occurring in different forms, we didn't say, okay, let's just regulate slavery. We're going to have slaves Monday to Thursday, and then Friday to Sunday, there's no slaves. We were like, this is wrong. Yeah. We need to abolish the exploitation of humans, right? Human slavery.
So stop slavery altogether.
We need to move the debate away from increasing the welfare conditions for animals and bigger cages and more space. They're still going to have their throat slit at the end of that process. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what happens before. We need to respect their right to life, not their right to be treated humanely. And so we need to focus on an animal rights, not a welfare approach. And then building upon that is an abolitionist approach, where we need to abolish the exploitation of animals unless it's for a necessity, which eventually, hopefully, the world doesn't need to do.
My dad just took a photo. He's just like, no, it's funny. My dad's one of those prime examples of people who, still eat meat, but whenever I'm around, he's happy to eat vegan all the time. And he has almond milk and soy milk. And I think he even might have stopped buying dairy milk. So it's, it's like little
dairy. Far out. We could go on this stuff for ages. But there's so much suffering in the dairy industry, more than the meat industry. Cheese, ice cream is just as messed up as having a bit of animal meat on your plate.
It's much more messed up. It's much more messed up. Check out Dairy is Scary. I can't remember what her name is. Do you remember? It's an excellent, it's like a 5-minute video.
She's very quirky.
Like, it's just really like 5 minutes and you're just like, oh, I can't eat that ever again.
And the egg industry, messed up.
Oh, I never really ate eggs. So like that was not even a thing really. But just because it comes from your like local grandma's farm doesn't mean that eggs are for us to eat as well. Plus, like just look at it this way, from the health perspective, like it's not good for us. It's like just
so much cholesterol in it.
But anyway, gotta wrap this up. We could keep going forever. Clearly, you can see Scott and I are extremely passionate about these topics, and both of us are really, into education, and we both come from science degrees and dive backgrounds, and
and non-veganism and carnism to veganism. We've
killed. It's not even like we just ate from supermarkets. We actually did kill those animals. We did fish, and
sorry, fish.
Sorry, fish.
I love you.
I remember
I didn't understand
so
what love was.
Of, like the first fish I killed. I remember just that, like, but it was really taxing. as a person. I also think, you know, if you're gonna eat the animals, like at least kill them yourself, you know, like have that respect. That's a whole
Doesn't need to happen. Yeah.
It doesn't need to happen indeed, but like for people, you know, for people who are just like, oh no, I'm just happy to go to the supermarket. I'm like, you don't even, anyway. So thank you, Scott, so much for being here. And I'm going to leave links down below to, you know, all of his social media handles and stuff, because I really think that, you know, what he does is amazing. And hopefully he's going to be participating even more with Sea Shepherd on future things that might be happening or might not.
Yeah, definitely, man.
But yeah, if you guys
Thank you
have any
very much
questions
for having me on, Kat.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
I'm just really jealous of the shark conservation stuff, and I look
You can
forward
go do
to.
it.
Yeah. Well, anyone who's interested
can.
on that,
You can. Anyone can volunteer with these groups.
So just get on that. So yeah, thank you so much, Scott, for being here, and yeah, keep fighting the good fight. You know.
my mantra: reconnect to your values and your core as a human, as a spiritual being. Mm-hmm. Realign your actions to your values and your beliefs, and go vegan. See you guys.
Bye.